Hi, folk. Excuse me. Hi, folks. Welcome to Hat Friday, the I Write Radio podcast and videocast for Friday. No Nicola Sturgeon press conference today. She's cut that down to Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. So Stuart informed me I missed this. Apparently, there are people need holidays. What's that about?
It's only for 2 weeks. Then they'll be back to 5 days a week. Oh, and it's 12:15 in future.
So those of you that were like me, were ignorant of this, now know. We're also going to discuss an article in the Spectator, and I've no doubt that will open up other doors for us to have a wee kick through. So the press conference, Stuart, you watched its entirety, I think.
I didn't see the first 5 minutes, but so Jimmy might bring you up to speed on that. But Jimmy and I both agree that the best bit of it was almost the last question. Paris Guten Mayus, I'm trying hard. This a young laddie a journalist who works for the Scotsman, who's trying to make himself a name in London now. Anyway, he came up with a cracker of a question. He basically said, look, the SNP are doing very well. Do you feel that they're a threat to the union? Nicola Sturgeon is 99 points ahead of you in popularity. So what is the strength of the union? So that left him just lost for words, burbling. Let's see. But Jimmy, what do you think he answered with?
A pile of his usual nonsense, mate. His whole press conference was like that. His whole press conference was a joke, mate. He's announcing new measures. He's announcing new opening up and that. And clearly he's not got the backing of his chief scientific or medical officers because they weren't there the day. Now, it's the first time Boris has done a press conference in weeks. So if he had their full backing, they'd have been stood next to him. But no, he's got his wee pal Dido that he's given a job running what they like to call NHS track and trace in England, but has sod all to do with the NHS. It's a completely privately owned piece of malarkey. As I say, mate, just earlier this week, we got warnings of possibly 120,000 deaths with a second wave in England coming up. And then, boom, they're saying to you, aye, Barry, we're opening up Twickenham and all the football grounds and that so you can go. We're opening up the Manchester Arena so you can go and watch a band and that. But do it under sensible conditions because you never know. You might still catch this thing.
Well, look, not only that, Jimmy, he's passed on responsibility. Remember when he passed on responsibility for this virus to the people? They had to have common sense. Now he's passing on responsibility to businesses and to local authorities.
And we're also going to get the attack on Public Health England this afternoon because apparently they've had the cheek to record as COVID death people who have had COVID and then died more than 28 days later. And they're now saying in England, no, our figures are too high because of this. So we're going to have to do a revision on our figures, which is abject, absolute nonsense. They've never been clean on their figures for day one.
That one actually surprises me because it seems quite apparent now that even when you leave hospital, you're going to carry the effects of COVID.
Well, there's people. Exactly, mate. There's people out there that had this disease months ago and are still stuck in the house, struggling with the after effects of it.
Yeah, they're talking about organ failure and all sorts.
You're talking about people with asthma that wouldn't have died. They've possibly been in and out of hospital, gone home, and then died later because of COVID. They wouldn't have died this year otherwise.
Exactly. It's a hell of a cheek to say that people who survived it are still suffering from COVID, but people who died 29 or 30 days later having been diagnosed, it wasn't COVID what done it. It's a nice wee bit of Boris speak, I think.
It doesn't seem to make an awful lot of difference to the headline figures.
Well, look, can we come back to the point, which is his past responsibility about going back to work? And now we can expect that people will be forced in England, back to work. They can't work at home if the company doesn't like it, and who's going to pay for it? And also, the responsibility for any more hotspots is now being passed to local authorities, and they haven't been promised any more money.
There's that weird one there, Stuart, when he was talking about giving the local authorities more powers to institute local lockdowns and such, and then pointed out that if they didn't do it well enough, central government might do it for them. It's a very strange wee power grab there, particularly given that the Mayor of Leicester said that their lessening of the lockdown in Leicester yesterday was political, which seems a bit odd, but...
It seems that it was Tory voting areas that were taken out of lockdown. Labour, Lib Democrat areas were left in lockdown. I get the feeling that what they're doing here is a scattergun approach. They're going to hand out little bits of power to everybody and see what sticks blame-wise.
Yeah,
they're going to talk about the health service, workers in care homes, local council.
Well, look, our favourite epidemiologist, Devi Sridhar, popped a wee tweet out not so long ago saying that local whack-a-mole doesn't seem a sensible option, given that any kind of lockdown is economically very damaging. So even small local lockdowns are economically damaging. And she's of the opinion that England should still be pursuing the same strategy that Scotland, Wales and Ireland have done, and that getting the numbers down to our kind of levels would make it a lot easier for England to actually get on with life post.
Well, this statistical move is to make it look like they've done that.
It was clearly a Dominic Cummings presser. We've got new slogans: hoping for the best, planning for the worst. And did you notice his face, Jimmy? He's obviously been out in the sun. His face was really red and sunburnt, so he's not been working hard.
Nah, mate, he's probably done the same as me. He's probably got a blood pressure problem. Been at the pies and the beer too much.
No, and it was definitely sunburn. And it was clearly focus group slogans. I mean, what was he said? The miracle of Zoom. Massive common sense of the British people.
I've got to say, though, I've never in my life ever heard a government use the phrase hoping for the best with any type of positivity before. It shows you how far they've slid that they actually think using hope for the best is a good idea.
And I'd like to mention, just before we move on, that they shouldn't be slackening off in England. Today, it's getting worse by the day in Ireland. They're looking like a resurgence in Ireland, and that border's open. So we need to be worried in Scotland too.
I'd like to to move back to the original point that was made, because it pertains to Scotland's independence referendum, hopefully, that's coming. I've got a clip here. It's a bit messy, guys, because I got it later. This is the question from
Paris Gutsayanis.
Well done, Jimmy.
Well done, Jimmy.
Bear with me, guys, because this is going to be... Oh, wait a minute. I've done that wrong. See, told you had to bear with me.
We can wait.
Stop share. I need to go back to the beginning. I need to get sound on it. Here we go.
Deaths, the number of hospital admissions, and have got the virus to the stage.
End of the previous question.
Of course, Jane, if you look at other countries around the world, I must say this in all candor to the British people. Look at other countries around the world. We can see all too clearly what could go wrong if we don't continue to follow the guidance, if we don't continue to keep this thing under control, because plainly this is a very contagious illness, and it is. There are parts of the world where it's continuing to spike. We don't want to see that in this country. We think we have a new panoply of tools that will enable us to fight it. The local lockdowns, the measures we're bringing in, the contain framework, test and trace, new drugs, new therapies. But in the end, the real secret is in the common sense and the collective action of the British people. Thanks, Jane. Let's go to Paris Gutsayanis of the Scotsman.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Nicola Sturgeon's net approval rating on coronavirus is 99% higher than yours. The SNP is on course to win an unprecedented majority in the Scottish Parliament elections next year, and support for independence has never been higher. Do you accept that you, Prime Minister, are the biggest threat to the Union? And if not, why do you think so many Scots want to leave the UK?
Well, thanks very much, Paris. I think, actually, when you look at what's happened under this, during this crisis, there has been very good and very close collaboration between, despite the surface differences and the polemics that you refer to, there have been very good discussions across the UK between public health authorities, between the scientific and medical officers, and actually the agenda that is being pursued by all the parts of the UK beneath the surface has been very, very similar. And it's thanks to the strength of the union, I would say, that actually there is we've had the response that we've been able to muster as a one whole United Kingdom, whether that's our armed services bringing testing kits across the whole of the country, taking people in remote parts of Scotland to the testing centres where they needed to go to, or the might of the UK Treasury getting an HMRC getting the furlough scheme up and running across the whole of the UK in a way that I thought was incredibly impressive. So I'm conscious that people will want to try to make divisions, and it's quite right that there should be distinctive approaches in some aspects of the way we approach coronavirus, but I've absolutely no doubt that the Union has proved its worth during this crisis time and time again. The oldest, most successful political partnership in the world, and we certainly don't want to see it broken up. Anyway, Paris, thank you very much for your contribution.
I'm sorry about that, folks. I didn't realise just quite how long he went on with his bullshit.
Well, I think it was worth it, because even right at the end, it's this bullshit about this oldest, most successful partnership in the world. I mean,
it's hardly a partnership, eh?
No, exactly. And before you move on, I'd like to point out I stayed with the TV and quickly watched BBC and Sky's reaction to him. And so you had Adam Bolton. He'd obviously been told to say, "Oh, the Prime Minister did well," but Beth Rigby was having none of that. And she said, "No, he did. You know, there's a big risk. The virus could get worse. It could get more virulent, and so, but they're going to ease it." And she pointed out that, as we now know, the scientific advisor and the medical advisor weren't present. He went totally against the scientific advice, totally against the medical advice. And then I quickly switched over to the BBC, and it's not Beth Rigby, it's Vicky Young. She was doing the usual, I'm going to swear, the usual mess, dung. She might as well have a Dominic Cummings hand up her backside. She just spewed out what Dominic Cummings had told her 5 minutes before.
Well, that's BBC all over the back, isn't it? Laura Kuenssberg, Dominic's biggest cheerleader.
So it seems to me the last couple of days anyway, between the idea of additional independent supporting parties standing on the list for Holyrood, this idea that they're now asking questions of the Conservative government at Westminster about the effect everything's having on the Union, it seems to me that the Scottish press are gearing up big time for a fight on the Constitution over the next half dozen months.
Yeah, I think the Scottish press can clearly see, but what we see, there's an election coming up. And that election campaign, regardless of how anybody wants to frame it, that election campaign, like every Scottish election since the referendum, will be centred around independence. You can't have half of the population of Scotland wanting independence without that being the biggest battleground in any election.
So you two both had a read of a Spectator article today. Again, I missed it, which, from what you said earlier, Jimmy, seemed to suggest that the Tories shouldn't fight the next Holyrood election on independence.
Yeah, it was one of these, as you say, it's a Spectator, mate, and they do like to carry some fantasy articles at times, but they kind of had the proposition that fighting upon the Constitution would be a mistake for the Tories because, well, Jackson Carroll is not very good at fighting on anything. He's certainly not got any particular. He's shown no talent whatsoever for constitutional politics. So that they should aim their campaign at where the Scottish Government is doing badly. But unfortunately for them, where they were suggesting that they aim it on where the Scottish Government is doing badly, it's where most people, I mean, some people believe the media crap, but they keep telling us, oh, we've dropped so far in the PISA rankings. And the Scottish Government will tell you the PISA rankings aren't particularly important. Take a look at our exam results where people have been getting wonderful results. They've been getting places at uni, they've been getting apprenticeships, they've been getting jobs. It doesn't matter what the league table looks like if you're actually providing a service that works for the people within that service.
This is Fraser Nelson of the Spectator. He edits.
Aye.
This is his personal thing.
Yeah.
Every time Scotland's mentioned, Fraser Nelson mentions the education.
He's it's by James Forsyth. I don't know too much about him. I've seen the name before. I'd like to reference something else here. The headline is "The Union is in graver danger than ever," and to some extent that plays into Peter Bell's plans. You know, if you keep talking about the Union rather than independence, we get closer and closer to his plan. So, which is an interesting angle. Jim's right. We all know how Ruth Davidson and the Tories did well in the recent elections. They just pummeled away at the Union, and they managed to took a lot of votes off the Labour Party and some of the Lib Dems, and then temporarily off the SNP, but they lost them all. So yes, the suggestion in the article is that they're going to have to force the Scottish Tories to fight the election on domestic issues, as Jimmy said, but I don't think they're very strong there. So what do you think?
They're not, I'm sorry, they're not capable. As Jimmy says, if they ignore the big question, which is independence, they're a laughingstock. And they don't have the talent to make a case, unless what they do, and I wouldn't put this past them, is move their MPs up into Scotland for the Holyrood election.
Well, I think there'll be
a bit of talent at Westminster when you compare it to what they've got at Holyrood.
I think there'll be a push, mate, but where I agree with the Spectator, I think the Union is in danger. The problem is, I see what they're doing with their internal UK market legislation and taking Henry VIII powers. I see that as rewriting the Acts of Union without the consent of Scotland. I think they're basically tinkering with it to the extent they're looking to tie us to England in perpetuity, but they're tying us as a possession. We're not a partner. We're certainly not an equal partner.
I've always felt that the Act of Union was the bat that we could use to beat Westminster, and they look like they're going to go down a route that totally undermines the Act of Union. And their argument then will be, oh, it's 300 years old. It doesn't really apply now.
So it's
300 years old, mate. It doesn't really apply now.
Exactly. But they're also using 700-year-old Henry VIII laws to bypass, 600-year-old Henry VIII laws to bypass parts of it.
I regularly listen to Coffee House Shots, which is a podcast by The Spectator. And James Forsyth is very much the epitome of the Westminster bubble Tory journalist. He buys it hook, line and sinker. He makes excuses for government failures, which it's tantamount to telling porkies.
I think the best way to sum up this article is, given what you've just said, is that it's a little window into how they're actually thinking down there.
Yeah, it's interesting just how often we get these little looks, Stuart, and it's interesting just how many times they do seem to not just on the Conservative side, but on the Labour side as well, they're taking as read what their failures up here are telling them. You know, Ian Murray's got massive influence in the Labour Party, and why? The Labour Party are a complete failure, and so is Ian Murray. And the Tories are exactly the same. They're believing what they're being told by people who have lost the last 5 or 6 elections.
Yep.
In fact, I'm sorry, but you didn't back a loser time after time after time and expect them to suddenly become a winner.
I do think Ian Martin's got a piece in the Times today, an ultra-unionist, I would call Mr. Martin. But the realization is definitely dawning on them that the talent pool of Tories at Westminster, at Holyrood, is definitely lacking.
It's dire. I mean, genuinely, they look to somebody like Adam Tompkins and think he's going to be their saviour, and they're like, mate, you use
seldom
his past.
seen Adam Tompkins recently.
Aye, probably because
has he had a wee dose of coronavirus, do you think?
I think they're trying to keep him away from the fray so they can bring him in as the great white hope for the election, mate. And he's
maybe
quite hard with the same Jackson Carlaw brush. I just wanted to point out, guys, that this whole, as I say, this rebadging the union or whatever they're calling it, but where I think it falls down. Well, it falls down quite quickly on a few points, but one that I'd like to point out: everything they're doing now is kind of to prevent divergence between Scotland and Westminster. The problem they have with trying to prevent divergence is that during this COVID crisis, divergence has proved to be the saviour of Scotland. All right, we had that crappy start, but ever since we've driven the figures down because we've taken different measures from England. Well, and I would also say that we started at a better point because our NHS was in a far better condition than the NHS in England. Our waiting times were better, our positive results were better, and that was because we had diverged from the policies that England were following. So if they're intent on saying divergence is a bad thing, I think the people of Scotland will laugh at them.
Well, we have diverged. That's not what I would have used, but what I've spotted in the last couple of months is that they keep stoking division. They're all, seriously, on Twitter, on social media, all their MPs, day after day, have the same message. It's Scotland's doing this, Scotland's doing that. And every day I just post the same little trope, unionists sowing division and separation. Who knew? I mean, they are adding votes day by their whole approach.
I think what they're also doing is, particularly when you get a Murdo Fraser, or what's the other one? Maurice Golden's been at it lately. I think they're looking for massive cybernet backlash so that they can then, I'm pretty sure that at some point in the campaign they will list in the Record in the Sun, they'll have the 100 worst cybernet tweets or something, and then try and tar the whole of the independence movement and the SNP support. They'll try and tar us all with that brush that we're all cybernet vampots.
I saw 2 or 3 in the last week. They're hanging out for the salmon scandal, and they're they're even thinking there's a possibility that Nicola Sturgeon might resign.
Oh dear, yeah, right. Yeah, that's going to happen.
I genuinely don't think if it depends. Alex has clearly said that he's not going to make any other further public comment until he has spoken to the parliamentary inquiry. So I think it's pretty much certain that the unionists will try and chivvy along this parliamentary inquiry so that Mr. Salmon speaks to them. And I'd imagine that the SNP would rather he doesn't speak to the parliamentary inquiry until after the election. So we'll see a few moves there as to
I've got a question on procedure here. I don't know if you remember, a week, 10 days ago, it was trailed in all the unionist press that witnesses to this inquiry were expected to take the oath.
Yeah, but there's a get-out clause in that, if you remember.
Is that normal?
Well, if it's a judge-led inquiry, there is.
It's not.
Well, what is really important, Nori, is the fact that people will be allowed to not take the oath if it might upset them, some kind of mental.
But I mean,
excuse.
if you go up in front of an inquiry, are you expected to affirm?
But yes, you tell the truth.
No, it's for example, at the judicial review that's due to follow the parliamentary inquiry, you probably would. But a parliamentary inquiry, it's no judge led. It's Nicola. It's what's her name, Linda Fabiani.
All right,
it's
sorry.
The parliamentary authority themselves. So to affirm an oath, I think that was purely a unionist ploy so that they can make it look quasi-legal when it clearly is not going to be quasi-legal. It's going to be political. But what we need to get to at the parliamentary inquiry is the actions of senior Scottish civil servants and whether or not they were operating under direction or operating off their own back.
The two people mentioned have been Leslie Evans and Judith McKinnon. Leslie Evans is she's the senior one, and Judith McKinnon, head of HR.
Aye, we need to get what actions they took, when they took them, and whether or not they were operating under direction from above, i.e. from politicians. Because if politicians have directed them to take those actions, then it may be it may be less concerning. If they've taken their actions off their own bat, given that certainly Leslie Evans, she may be on secondment to the Scottish government.
This data dump that the SNP's just done, there's a letter in amongst it where, signed by Nicola Sturgeon, where she specifically instructs them to make sure the system looks back at the actions of previous ministers.
Right.
So the retrospective element was certainly encouraged.
But that's only to be
Sturgeon.
That's only to be expected given the historical context that the Me Too that it came about in with the Me Too movement. Because let's be honest, the Me Too movement is where it came from, and the Me Too movement was always looking backwards, not forwards.
Well, and the other point that hasn't been emphasized is that same sentence contained the words ministers of all political parties. So no doubt they're trying to push this to say she was doing it to get salmoned. But it states in the letter all political parties.
Well,
my first thought was, well, that's sensible, girl.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, we did lose a first minister in Henry in dubious circumstances, so it's not a bad thing to be looking back at all ministers.
Well, goodness me, it was a small item. It was a wee bit of rent for a shop in Glenrothes. It wasn't exactly.
Aye, but he was
and taxis. Don't forget the taxis.
It was a small thing, mate. But at the end of the day, I actually feel pretty sorry for Henry McLeish. I think he's a pretty decent guy. But if you're going to rise to the position of First Minister, you have to not only be squeaky clean, but to be seen to be squeaky clean, don't you?
Well, in Scotland, if you happen to be a Minister of the Crown or a Prime Minister, apparently these sorts of rules don't apply to you.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, mate. They've never applied to the Conservative Party, have they?
No. Anything else you want to hit on in particular, guys? Anything jump out to you, today's press and whatnot?
Really well, we touched on Peter Bell. Peter Bell's moving on with he had a meeting, he's moving on with his campaign to dissolve the union.
I think he's. It's interesting how it's only a few weeks ago since we spoke to Peter, and he was talking about dissolve the union. But it's interesting just how the focus upon the union has become considerably more marked since Peter started putting things out there and using the hashtag dissolve the union.
Well, I think it's possibly he starts to look sensible against all these list parties. Yeah,
they've not really helped themselves, will they? Online infighting and bloggers blasted at each other, and that they've kind of showed themselves up for the.
I understand there's rumours of solid action.
Yeah, well, I think
contemplated.
I think there has to be
actually ongoing, yeah.
Well, the suggestion is that we got to have a manifesto. We've got to focus on the manifesto.
We have to
manifesto.
Aye, we have to make sure that independence is front and centre in the SNP manifesto for fighting next year's election.
Well, that's not.
They
No,
ca- we
that's
can't-
not,
they
that's,
can't
that's
just-
not Peter's position. Peter's position is dissolve the union.
Well, aye, but the bottom line, mate, the only way you dissolve the union is by making the SNP part of that campaign to dissolve the union. If they're no part of it, then all it is a hashtag.
Well, that's what needs to be done then.
But what I think we've said before, though, that the SNP cannot just be handed another mandate to run the country for 5 years and do nothing with that mandate, because that's how it feels.
We can't risk that, because I mean, we were told that Brexit, a no-deal Brexit, was the key to unlocking the independence for Scotland. Now Brexit is rushing up on us. Where's the key? Where's the lock to put the key in?
Well, I think that's an extrapolation, Stuart. I don't think anybody said no deal Brexit was the key to independence.
Oh, rubbish.
Well, I can't remember any senior SNP politician saying that.
You're narrowing it down now.
Sorry.
Well, who else is going to change it?
We were discussing the SNP. You know, I mean, they're not stupid people. None of them are going to come out and publicly say we'll get independence with a no deal Brexit.
Wait until Brexit. Wait until Brexit. All through last year, our Westminster MPs were kept saying.
Stuart, I'm sorry, you're conflating headlines with actual policy here. The SNP have never. They've hoped, they've expected a move to yes because of Brexit.
I never mentioned policy. I'm talking about the key to unlock independence, because they would expect the people of Scotland to rise up one way or another because of Brexit. That was always what was said all through 2019.
Who said it?
Oh, come on.
No, don't do oh, come on. Tell me who said it.
Oh, so you didn't watch every Westminster House of Commons debate and every crisis through the year?
Yeah, I did, but you're talking about what newspapers.
We were
the
persuaded,
the opinions you refer to are as valid or as invalid as ours.
We were persuaded to wait. We had all these marches because nothing much was happening, and the excuse was, when Brexit comes along, that'll make such a difference that then we can make a move. Now Brexit's just round the corner, and what's happening?
Well, I don't know if you believed it, Stuart. I didn't. I never thought Brexit would be the only pillar of a new indie referendum. I thought it would influence. I hoped it would be a big influence.
I never believed it either, but we were told it.
Well, I don't remember the SNP telling us it.
Well, it certainly wasn't the unionists.
If that's what the SNP believed, why did they fight so hard against Brexit?
Oh, don't even go there. That's a whole different cat of nine tails.
Well,
that's the wrong metaphor there, isn't it?
Just a tad. You thinking about your dungeon again, son?
No, that was a right mess. That was, honestly, that's a whole new story. You could say by results, by the results, they made the wrong decisions. But at
Stuart,
the time,
I asked you a question.
Which one?
If the SNP believed Brexit was the route to independence, why did they expend all that energy on trying to circumvent Brexit?
Well, which bit of the SNP are you talking about? It was quite clear that Nicola Sturgeon was in charge, and all through 2019 and all those House of Commons crises and all the rest of it, all those
She's not in the House of Commons.
She still ran she still decided what Ian Blackford said and did last year.
You are absolutely determined to write this to your view of the power in the SNP. I mean, what the SNP did with Brexit. They fought it tooth and nail.
Yes, and it was a mistake in the end, wasn't it?
Well, you might well believe it was a mistake, but that's what they did.
Yeah, Stuart,
that's historical.
I'm certainly not alone.
Barry, so you're now claiming that freak show bloggers that think Nicola Sturgeon needs to be replaced, you're claiming them as backing for you being right. If it was a mistake, why are the SNP sitting at 55% and Yes is sitting at 54%?
Oh, yeah, well,
Could be very
that's
well
true. But
if
on
you
the
did.
other hand, look who's sitting in as Prime Minister with an 80-seat majority.
Well, we couldn't.
That's
Whatever
because of all
Scotland
the
done
votes
couldn't
he got in
prevent that, mate.
Scotland.
How could Scotland possibly prevent the Tories winning an election in England?
You've got short memories, guys.
No, Stuart, we've got memories. We can actually remember what happened. I mean, I don't get this. You are so desperate for some conspiracy involving the leadership of the SNP. At no point.
No, not at all. All I'm saying was there was a dispute. Obviously, there was no agreement to start with. Should they go down this road of supporting the different, to supporting the way they did.
Supporting what, Stuart? They never supported Brexit, and they fought it tooth and nail.
They fought it. Yes, they fought it tooth and nail, and it proved to be a disaster because we ended up with Boris Johnson with an 80-seat majority. So,
2 minutes ago, you were telling me that they believed Brexit would be the leverage for the Indian F2.
Yes, they believed a no
So
deal Brexit.
Why did they fight Brexit if they believed that would get us independence?
I'm not going to argue against this, guys. If you're trying to rewrite history, fine. It was passed around. It was definitely a major issue of consideration all through last year.
It was a point of discussion.
Also, Brexit no deal Brexit wasn't going to help Scotland get its independence. Rubbish.
We all hoped it would drive no voters into the yes camp.
And
no voting Europhiles into the yes camp.
And it has. And for it being such a disaster, as I say, they're flying in the polls. And you've also got a Prime Minister. As much as it might be a disaster to have Boris as Prime Minister of the UK right now because we're part of the UK, but Boris is a massively divisive figure. And frankly, the fact that basically England has now elected Colonel Blimp.
Yeah, well,
Colonel Blimp has always been an arch-English nationalist.
Well, if that view doesn't support what I've just said, what does? Yes,
you just said Boris being Prime Minister was a disaster. I'm saying it's a good thing for us.
Well, there you go. If you believe we need a disaster in England to get our independence.
Well, it basically points out that the Scottish nationalists will be fighting English nationalists for the next 10 years unless we do something about it. And we have the opportunity to do something about it next year. And then you get you'll get the doomsayers that are going to tell you that on January the 1st, Boris Johnson, perhaps the stupidest man ever to be elected to that office, has some master plan that he's going to eradicate Scotland by shutting Holyrood. He can't do it. He's not got the balls to do it.
He's not going to shut Holyrood. He's never going to shut Holyrood. He's just going to emasculate Holyrood. Just take powers away, drip by drip.
Emasculating Holyrood is exactly the same thing as shutting it. Do you think we're no wise enough to know?
Oh, so there's no difference, Jimmy. If you think there's no difference between shutting Holyrood and just slowly removing powers,
he's not going to slowly remove them, mate. He's going to take that. He's going to take all the important ones in a winner, or that's what people are telling us. That's what the doomsayers are telling us, that Holyrood wouldn't matter anymore. Scotland doesn't even bloody give a damn about who they elect to Westminster these days. We're run for Holyrood. 90% of people in Scotland do not look to Westminster for their political leadership anymore.
What's that got to do with this? We're talking about trying to get the union dissolved. We're trying to get rid of, Scotland as a colony, whatever way you look at it. And there's been an argument for the last year and a half. You guys have just turned your argument against what I said about Brexit on its head.
Go and stop bullshitting that shite. Go and stop talking that abject crap. Each one of us is anti-Brexit. The thing is, I didn't give a damn about it. A no-deal Brexit is a economic disaster.
Are you trying to tell me that weren't thousands of people in Scotland hoping for a no-deal Brexit last year because they're desperate for independence? Of course there were.
Did you see them marching in the streets? Did you see any marching in the streets pro-Brexit? Because if you did, I'm telling you now, you're talking hot.
You think I just made that up?
Well, where are they? Where are these people that are desperate for a no-deal Brexit?
And you've just said 5 minutes ago, we've got a useless Prime Minister in England, and therefore this is going to help us get us an independence.
Aye, but I'm still saying a no-deal Brexit's a bloody disaster financially for this country. But I didn't care. I didn't care about whether Scotland has
all you've done, Jimmy, is turn yourself over on the argument.
No, Stuart, you're tying yourself up in knots and then trying to drag me and Norrie into your fucking knot.
Oh well, whatever.
I spent a little bit of time yesterday reminding myself how Boris Johnson was never going to be Prime Minister, according to the No camp during the referendum. Do you remember that?
Aye, Blair McDougall in particular had a belt.
Blair McDougall, Ruth Davidson.
TV bit about it.
So, you know, there's madder things happened in Brexit. Nobody believed Boris Johnson was going to be Prime Minister.
Not back then. No, not
and
back
I
then.
don't believe there were very many people who believed Brexit no deal was a realistic possibility.
No, I think even on the Tory benches, the idea of a no deal Brexit was never taken seriously until they managed to remove Theresa May.
So the other kind of question I was wanting to ask you, Stuart, why is everybody so upset when the polls are saying 55% SNP, 54% independents?
Well, because we might not even get to a Holyrood election, but it may not mean very much. And in the end of the day, they can just still say no in Westminster.
They don't have time to shut down that particular Democratic avenue. They can't shut Holyrood before.
I'm not saying they are.
Wait a minute, Stuart,
you're putting words in my mouth. I never said they were going to shut it down.
Well, if you'd let me finish, Stuart, I would have explained what I was trying to say.
Don't say I did.
I didn't say you did. I said they don't have time to shut down that Democratic route. They can't stop the SNP doing well in a Holyrood election next year. At no point have I accused you of saying that. The point I'm trying to make is we will get that opportunity to vote for an independent supporting party. What happens after that worries me. I mean, I think they are going to try and hollow out Holyrood, but they can't do it that quickly.
Well, there's another statement I wouldn't be so sure about.
Well, it's, as I said yesterday, I think the important thing is the first fight that we have where they turn around and say, I'm sorry, you can't pass that law because our committee of Tory worthies say you can't. That's the first big fight.
You mean to say we've got to sit here in our bums and wait for them just to bring that law in and do nothing or say nothing about it?
No, Stuart, what we're going to do is we're all going to go out and buy illegal guns and we're going to attack. What are we supposed to do? What are you expecting us to do here?
So you're just going to put your hands up?
Declare UDI.
No, you're just going to put your hands up.
Well, we're going to declare UDI.
Well, all you're going to do is I don't like it and just go off to the pub.
No, we'll declare UDI.
Yeah, genuinely, what do you suggest? This law, unfortunately, they will be able to push through Parliament.
If I had a key to unlock it, of course I would be using it. I don't.
Well then. So why do you expect me to do something different to you? Except wait for the opportunity.
Why do we bother recording these? And if we're not got a little bit of hope?
We've always got hope. We're talking about process.
Well, that's very true. We could. I think perhaps we should discuss Peter Bell's article, the long one that he wrote yesterday.
Yeah,
it was all about process.
Well, I'll need to read it first.
Well, that'd be fair.
Has anybody got anything cheerful and funny to finish with?
The sun might be out tomorrow.
Might be out tomorrow. Okay.
Aye, but they'll still want you to pay 75% for 75 pence, and it's toilet roll. It's cheaper than Poundland.
Yes, okay.
Okay, we'll leave it at that, boys, before we rip each other's heads off.
Perish I thought, but it's all just a good rant.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Jimmy. I'm Norrie. And thanks for listening, folks. Listening and watching. And we'll catch up with you day off tomorrow, catch up with you on Sunday, by which time we will all have a solution to the problems we've been discussing.
Oh, aye, right.
Aye, there's more likelihood of me spending the rest of the afternoon shoving hedgehogs up my arse backwards.